Welcome back to the water cooler, everybody. Look, it's no secret that the majority of the world has been actively against the Jewish people for centuries. Just, start with Genesis and work your way forward from there. Unfortunately, it's no different in 2022. And while leaders like Joe Biden may slap on their performative activism hat, it's all a facade because Jews are still the subject of anti-Semitic bias. Last week, the White House announced actions targeting hate-fueled violence at their summit. The Hill reported this, quote, "The summit will put forward a shared vision for a more united America, demonstrating that the vast majority of Americans agree that there is no place for hate-fueled violence in our country. And when Americans stand united to renew civic bonds and heal divides, we can help prevent acts of hate and violence," the White House said in a fact sheet previewing the event. Federal agencies will announce new steps to improve resources available to schools, law enforcement agencies, museums, and libraries to respond to hate-fueled violence, the White House said. The summit will also feature the launch of a bipartisan initiative led by former White House officials who served in both Democratic and Republican administrations to foster dialogues in communities across the country. So some applauded the show that the Biden administration was putting on, with Susan Rice saying this: "For a heartfelt take on the summit by an Orthodox Jewish attendee, read this in A.J. Post opinion. At the White House, I met the diverse Americans, Jews and Gentiles, young and old, who survived violent hate crimes. Together, we mapped a hopeful future." But many were quick to point out the fault in her logic, with Rabbi Yaakov Menken saying this: "The White House held a summit against hate-fueled violence with zero representation from those most frequently targeted. Chasidic Jews, that's a fact," Susan Rice, and defending it is a whole new level of callous and tone deaf. And that, by the way, wasn't the last that Rabbi Menken had to say about the anti-Semitism that Jews face daily, even by members in their own community who happen to be members of the media. So he wrote this op-ed for Newsweek about a New York Times hit piece against the Hasidic Jewish community. This is what he said, quote, "Some would say that one cannot accuse a pair of journalists with obviously Jewish surnames of anti-Semitic bias, but the Talmud teaches that an ignorant Jew hates Jewish scholars even more than anti-Semites hate Jews. And throughout history, individual Jews have made a name for themselves, characterizing old anti-Semitic canards as present-day truth. The Times writers took aim at Hasidic Jews in a way that the Times itself would loudly denounce as bigoted if done against any other minority community. They not only used the sensationalism, lies, and exaggeration characteristic of yellow journalism, but did so while applying ancient tropes to their current targets. An obvious implication from the Times is that Hasidic parents are monolithic and incapable of independent thought. Their children corralled into these schools despite the writers' obvious awareness that Hasidic schools are either completely independent or tied to one Hasidic leader. They paint with a broad brush, declaring that the Hasidic Jewish community has long operated one of New York's largest private schools, as if all were the same and jointly responsible for the standards of one school. This sort of stereotyping is considered repugnant when used against any other community. Why is it acceptable here?" Amen to that, not a woman. And joining me now to discuss this is the managing director of the Coalition for Jewish Values, our good friend, Rabbi Yaakov Menken. Thanks for being here, sir.
And thank you for having me back.
Well, look, your op-ed, you touch on this fact that anti-Semitic Jews can be more harmful than anyone else. So expand on that and give us the backstory of this New York Times article, Rabbi.
Well, the New York Times article was, again, it was written by a pair of Jews who are obviously very much on the progressive left. And they demonized the Orthodox community in a host of classic ways. And it's simply a truth right out of the Bible that a Jew can do unique damage, specifically because they say, as a Jew, this is not anti-Semitic. There's nothing wrong with this. This is absolutely true, etc. And they have unique credibility, obviously, against the charge of anti-Semitism, because even when what they're saying is flatly anti-Semitic. So because they're Jews, they get away with it and they can do more damage.
What is it about the Hasidic community? Why are they targeting the Hasidic community? What's going on here exactly?
Well, first of all, they are the other. But second of all, I mean, the Hasidic community and Orthodox Jews in general, who live a very different lifestyle than that of most Americans. When a progressive Jew sees religious Jews, they say, my grandparents did that. My great grandparents did that. We supposedly grew beyond that. We escaped that. Why are there still people like that? And they feel a certain level of guilt. They feel a certain level of, hey, I ought to be doing that too, if I had maybe more of a different Jewish background. And sometimes it's subconscious and sometimes it comes right to the forefront. But there's a tremendous subconscious need, just as there's a way, and just to make a comparison, there's a subconscious need that is very obvious in the European communities to see and blame Israel as if Israel's doing all kinds of horrible things to the Palestinians, which of course Israel is not doing, because the Europeans know what they just did to Jews. It must be that Jews are capable to, well, it's the same way here. They say these people must be just as bad as we are. It can't be that they're actually living elevated religious lives. Otherwise, we should have stayed with it too.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. Tell us more about this White House summit here and how it really was of no benefit to one of America's most vulnerable groups, the Jews.
I'm not ready to say that it's of no benefit because we haven't seen any of what these initiatives are. And the reason why we haven't seen what these initiatives are is that we weren't invited. And by we, I don't mean my particular organization or myself as managing director. I mean that there was nobody there from the Hasidic community, the Charedi community, the visibly Orthodox, the folks who, you can tell them a mile off, the black hat, the suit, the sheitel on the women, the obvious, differences in dress and style that even if I would take the yarmulke off, you can still tell.
Yeah.
And they instead had, now you can be Orthodox, you can be observant, but you can be of the modern Orthodox school. And that's who they'd invited. They invited a couple of modern Orthodox people. But if you look at who's getting targeted in New York, who are the overwhelmingly more likely, the preponderance of hate crimes per capita, and it's by a factor, it's a multiple. It's like even before the most recent wave, which has made it much worse, it was already true that an Orthodox Jew was 3 times more likely to be the victim of a hate crime than anybody else. The black community, Muslims, you name it, nobody else had it anywhere nearly as bad as Jews who look like, well, like we do.
Right. And, that's the interesting because not only should you be invited, you should be at the top of the list and you're neither here nor there. So as we wrap up here, I got about a minute 15 or so. What's the remedy here? I mean, how can we protect Jews and start to see genuine change in the way people perceive, whether it be Orthodox or Hasidic Jews, or honestly, just Jews in general?
Well, you got to start actually living the diversity thing. These people talk the talk, but they're not walking the walk. If you're not able to welcome in people from all different faiths and backgrounds, but especially the overwhelmingly most likely target of hate crimes, when you want to talk about the need to be united against hate, you're not really part of the solution then, now are you? All we have to do is treat the Hasidic Jews and everybody else in America like everyone else. We're on an equal playing field. All of a sudden, by the way, today, it's all of a sudden completely acceptable to say the most racist and hurtful and horrible things to white people. Why is that acceptable in America? We're supposed to be striving for Martin Luther King's vision here, and it's obvious that here we are in 2022, and there's still a long way to go.
Oh my gosh, if he came back in 2022, I don't know if he'd say Oi Gewalt, but he would say something along those lines for sure. All right. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
That's great. Rabbi Yaakov Menken. Look him up. He's active on social media, on Twitter and all those places, the managing director of the conservative values there. So please do that. We'd like to have him on all the time here, and we will continue to have him back on. They will not shut him up. They will not shut up the Hasidic and Orthodox Jews out there in the land. All right, when we come back, Caroline Levitt will be here. Boy, she's a firebrand, a former Trump official, and now she could be the youngest member ever in Congress. Back with her next.